Hey, it's Zach, and I'm back with another episode of Elevate and Accelerate. And today is joining me a very special guest, Joe Kiedinger. Joe is an author, inventor, entrepreneur, an entertainer, which I'm sure we'll talk about as well. He's a speaker and a family man. So he's got over 2 decades previously working in advertising and marketing, but now really focused in working with companies and organizations at the heart of servant leadership and developing company culture all around this word called Dignify, which you can see on his shirt there. So we'll talk more about that. But Joe, thanks so much for joining me today.
Zach, it's a real privilege and an honor to be able to spread our message and have folks like you to get to meet and get excited about this stuff with. It's just energizing. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. And look, we are, in the heat of the presidential election. There's so many things that we can talk about with leadership. But as I alluded to in the introduction, you are a former cruise ship entertainer, but you're living in Green Bay, Wisconsin. And so I'm guessing there's no cruise ships out there. So kind of walk me through the process of what brought you to Green Bay, or that's always where you were, and how'd you become a cruise ship entertainer?
You got it. Actually, the Great Lakes are now starting a revival of cruise ships. It just started. Okay. We had our first cruise ship here since 1920 that came to Green Bay. That was going around, to Canada, to the Great Lakes, and all that kind of stuff. So there was our first cruise ship since the 1920s when they used to do that. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, that's really cool.
But I was born and raised here in Green Bay. I love Green Bay. It's awesome to raise a family. It actually was rated the #1 city in America by News World Report to raise a family for safety and economics and cost of living and so forth, not too long ago. And so we've really evolved. Of course, people know us because of the Green Bay Packers. That's what put us on the map. Which I am a season ticket holder because of Grandpa, right? Grandpa had tickets before the stadium was even built.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, I grew up here. My family was an entertainment family. My mother is very musical. And so all of us kids, they called us the Von Kiedinger family, like the Von Tropps, from Sound of Music, that family.
Yeah.
And so we sang and performed. And so my sister took that into a career on cruise ships. And she went to school for performing arts. And I wasn't. I was in school for communication. Ironic, I invented a communication tool because I went to school just to avoid math. So communication majors, you only take one math class. Anyway, because of my sister being on the cruise ship, she knew the path to get on. And so she called me and said, hey, they're looking for a male singer when I get off in 9 months. Record yourself singing a couple songs, send your headshot, send a resume, and send it to this person. And I told them about you, and they're waiting for your stuff. And so that's pretty cool. On the cruise ships. I did one tour, and I was, in those Broadway Hollywood shows, I was the main singer, and you got all the dancers on the male lead female.
Yeah.
And it was for Carnival.
Gotcha.
Back when I was young and beautiful. 1990.
The party ship. Yeah. That's great, man. Well, that's interesting. So born and raised in Green Bay. It's funny. I grew up as a Green Bay Packers fan because of my dad, even though I'm from the Northeast in New Jersey. There was a guy from our town who went on to play for the Green Bay Packers, which I think is why dad started following him in the first place. I believe his name was Jim Ringo, if I remember correctly. He was a lineman. Famous. Yeah. So anyway, I'm guessing he was from the area. That was the story my dad always told me anyway. Now I live in Philadelphia. So last week I was really conflicted with the Green Bay Eagle game. So it was just, it was a rough one. But look, the reason why we're here today and really what I want to talk to you about is this idea of leadership. So, you ran a business for 20 some years, advertising, marketing, and branding. You've got a book out, the Branding in Chief, which is interesting. And so, I'm just curious as to your shift in what caught your attention about servant leadership in the first place. And then what obviously led you to developing the software and this framework for helping leaders.
Yeah, you bet. So you start in life and you have people that cross your path and you almost get into something accidentally, right? So being a performer, I started performing arts school right after that cruise ship, right? Met a dancer on the ship, started that. That didn't work out. I realized I couldn't manage money as a business owner. I could market and I could do all that stuff, but I couldn't manage it. So we weren't making any money. So I go to work selling television, like TV commercials. Mm-hmm. My dad did that. So I go on coattails, right, of people. If you haven't figured that out already, Amy, my sister, my dad. And I found I was really good at it. I liked advertising. I thought it was fun. You could write creative ads. I'm a creative guy. It was the real world stuff. And I met a gentleman who was starting had grocery stores. And his name was Dave. And he introduced me to servant leadership. So he advertised with me. And within 5 years, I started my own ad agency and had him catch me. And I had some other smaller clients, but he had 4 stores in different cities in Wisconsin. Today, that company has 45 stores and is a $1.5 billion company. And he built it all on culture. Yes, we did marketing and advertising. And I realized that I had a front row seat to the great servant leadership authors like Jim Hunter, who wrote the book The Servant. I think it sold like over 4 million copies, many languages. Tom Thibodeau, who runs Viterbo University's Servant Leadership Master's Program, which is the only one in the country that you go to physically. And so I had a front row seat, and Dave taught me that culture just beats all that other stuff. He goes, culture will eat strategy for lunch, which is not his. That's a Covey statement. But I was just able to dive in and capture my heart. And I realized if I really want to inspire and empower companies to grow, which was my battle cry for the marketing agency, I realized that marketing wouldn't do it. Not only that, the marketing landscape was changing. I mean, social media is just such a bigger juggernaut back in the day when that was happening. I was just like, my heart's not in that. I want to help companies grow. And so I focused my attention starting in 2008, and we started in 2002, on allowing my team members to do marketing. And I'm going to start exploring this idea of servant leadership, a culture operating system. So what I found what was missing in any leadership program is they're great at telling you why it's important. They're great at telling you what it is, but I couldn't find a system of how. How do I do it? Like, can I follow a system? Kind of like lean manufacturing. And so my whole premise was I'm going to be the how of creating great cultures. It's going to be black and white. It's going to be here's how you start, here's the process, here's what you do. Because in the past, it's all up to that leader to figure it out. And you either have this really great leader who can figure it out, or they don't. They don't know where to start. And so that's what I committed my life to. And it started with a technology that we now call Dignify, which is based on human dignity. So I wanted to base it on something that we all agreed upon, and nobody disagrees with human dignity. So I'm like, why don't we start with that? And then that'll be our foundational stone, and then let's build a way to do it. And it took 17 years to figure it out.
So a labor of love, obviously.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I'm curious, right? Like I said earlier, and we're not running down a political rabbit trail, but it seems like most of the world's problems, right, are the result of bad leadership in a lot of cases. And we're sort of in the throes of, the highest held position in the free world, right? But it's not just a political issue, and there's a lot of distrust, right? If you look at the polls and you look at the polls of our leaders and all these different things that show up, rarely is it over 50%, and even in the EU, it's like 40%. And so I'm gonna throw a couple of these stats at you that I thought were really interesting, and this is specifically around the workforce in America, okay, right? And so it's 65% of employees say that they would rather change their boss than have a pay raise.
I didn't hear that one before. That's fun.
Isn't that great?
Change their boss other than a pay raise. Okay.
Yeah. So they'd rather change their boss than get a raise. And then 75% of people, so 3 out of 4 people, quit their jobs specifically because of their direct line manager. So the biggest issue of bad leadership is the cause of the number one reason of voluntary turnover in the workforce. And so when I saw that, just kind of doing some research to be able to have a conversation with you and the impact that leadership has on organizations too, it was shocking to me, but also like experientially, right? Like I understand what that's like to be under bad leaders, and like I've left organizations just because of the bad leaders. Yeah. And so I'm curious, like what's your approach to helping executives or mid-level managers or the people that you work with shift that mindset and really help to build trust with their employees?
Sure. So our approach is completely unconventional, okay? Because the old approach, Zach, would be let's bring that leader through a leadership survey. And let's point out all the things that these employees said are good about them and all the things that are weak about them that they don't like. Okay. Now, there's an element of that within our system. There's an element, but you have to open up the mind before the leader can see all that. Because most of us are wired to be defensive and protective. Being vulnerable is something that folks don't understand the science behind. They don't understand themselves and why they react the way they do. They don't understand any of that stuff. So what we do is we begin by educating the top leaders as to why do people get defensive? How are you emotionally wired? What are your dignity traits? See, and that's what separates us. We understand the dignity drivers of people. Let me tell you what that means. To define dignity is to be worthy of honor and respect. That's the definition. It's your worthiness. This is emotional. They're emotional drivers. So you might have heard of strength finders. You might have heard of like dance police. Those are more logical drivers. Like you love strategy. You have a belief system. You have this, you have that. This is emotional drivers. These are the real things that allow you to be successful in life. Okay, your dignity drivers, which reside in a part of the brain that doesn't process language. It's a limbic system. The cerebral cortex is our logical and creative side, but our emotional center is the limbic system, and that's where dignity resides. So when you ding my dignity, okay, by just being Zack, right, I get triggered, and you go, why did he get defensive? And someone else goes, well, I know why I got defensive. Like everyone's perspective of reality is framed through these drivers. So what we do is we start with education. Hey, here's what makes you awesome. Does that feel like you? Yeah, that's totally me. Yeah, okay. That's what drives you. Okay, that's how you're successful? Yes. So what are your do's and don'ts if I'm going to work with you? So Dignify reveals do's and don'ts. And so now we have a conversation around dignity, which everybody agrees upon. And now people go, oh, I'm digging your dignity. I had no idea. Because we don't know how to talk about it because we can't express it. Because it's an emotion. Very few people can express emotion. So what we do is take a logical approach to human dignity, which is your worthiness. And so here's where the crux is. Everybody, including you and I, defend our worthiness at all costs, and you don't have to. You don't have to. So let's say give an example. There's 56 dignity traits. Let's say you're a perfectionist. That's one of them. Okay, perfectionist, precise, these type of detailed. And let's say you selected those as your top 5 dignity drivers. Okay? There's 100% chance when I meet with you and say things like, Zack, you're too detailed. Like your detail is so, like you overthink things. What am I doing? Shaming Zack. Right. What is the person going to do? I have nowhere to turn because I can't help but be detailed. That's how I'm wired. Like you're asking me to not be me, but you don't realize that this is happening. You just know that it feels like crap on the receiving end. And the leader is like, and a lot of times the leader won't even say anything. They're just all in the details. They don't even know how to coach them because they just don't get it. Yeah. Does that make sense? So we have to start with education and helping people feel what dignity feels like. And what happens is a team bonds, like it's like putting, like, what are those turbo thrusters these race cars have? And you inject that fuel, it goes boom, right? Dignity ignites everything because everybody agrees with it. And so once you get that idea, that mindset shifts quickly, now people see each other differently. Now I have the data to logically talk to you about being a perfectionist instead of shaming you and being frustrated. So instead of having a conversation of why is Zack that way, then my brain will go, my ego will take over. Oh, because he's this and that, right? Now belittle you accidentally. Instead, I go, how can I better understand Zack and how can I bridge to him? Now, that's what our program does. How, not why. You start asking why, your brain will go all over and start belittling people.
Right. And that makes sense to me because, being someone who has ADHD, for example, like not a detail-oriented person unless I'm in a hyper-focused spot. And then I'm super detailed. And so it's the shift, but a lot of times trying to fit into a common mold when I didn't understand what I had to work with and what my dignity points were, made it really difficult for me, or it took more energy for me to do tasks that it would take most people a least amount of energy with. And so I'd have to create my own way of being able to do it. And some of the best leaders that I had, even if it was my teacher in 5th grade, right, were the people who were willing to see me and would let me stand up in the back of the classroom and walk around, as long as I read a paragraph each time. Like, so if the class was reading, if I wanted to get up and walk around because I would be fidgety and not paying attention, it was like a rule. It's like, you can walk around, but you've got to follow along because you're going to have to read at least once if you're going to do that. And so it was like there was people in my life who were good leaders, like you're talking about, who spoke to my dignity, whether they realized it or not, that allowed me to excel in those situations. So that's really cool.
You are so right. I mean, that is such a rare trait. So therefore, what if everybody had the data on Zack? Now I don't have to be frustrated anymore. I mean, Einstein said you can expect a fish to climb a tree, but its whole life it'll feel a failure. Do you know what I mean? Like, right. Why are you forcing me to be someone I'm not? And this is really important. What's really cool is we're bringing this into business, and then you know what these employees say? Can I have this for my teenager? Mm-hmm. Can I have this for my parent or for my spouse? Absolutely. Stop expecting your kid to be successful the same way you were. Sometimes it works. Sometimes they're wired just like you. We found that opposites attract. We've heard that, right? But the same is kind of true with child and parent. I've noticed that now these parents who are leaders, they discover and they say, hey, Joe, can you unpack this snapshot? We call it a snapshot, dignity snapshot of my teenager or my wife. We find that the opposites are like, they're just like me. I go, no, they're a complete compliment to you. They're not like you. They're a compliment. So if the perfectionist loves the goofy dad, right? Because they're all structured and there's this opposite energy that just goes weep. Where the mother and the daughter might be the same, very neat, tidily, but they're not getting along, right? And then we see this goofy kid who just loves the perfectionist mom. It's like, wow, this is mind-boggling how these complementary dignity traits come together. But when you're at work, it drives us nuts.
Right.
I'm like, I'll commit my whole life to you being my compliment. But when it comes to work, if you act like my wife, I can't stand you.
Right.
It's
right.
Like really
right.
bizarre.
And it's funny that you mentioned kids too, and how this works. I mean, because we're talking about it from the perspective of this is humans, and it's humans in relationship. And so you're teaching leaders how to build positive relationships with their employees and with the people that they're leading. So it makes sense that would translate over.
Yes.
But it makes even more sense knowing your story, because this whole thing was born from, your stepson, Alex, I believe his name was, right?
Yes.
And so it was like that, the conflict of understanding how to communicate with him while playing a board game, right? And now you've got a patented technology. So kind of walk me through how that happened and how that was sort of a catalyst for this idea in the first place.
Well, you got it. So in my servant leadership influencers, I'm hearing Jim Hunter do a speech, and he would use the golden rule, which we've heard: treat others how you want to be treated. And he would say things like, be the boss you wish your boss was. Be the parent you wish your parent was. Be the friend you wish your friend was. These kind of high-level esoteric thoughts, And I just had an epiphany. I go, I think this whole golden rule thing, I get it where it came from, and I get the message it was trying to send. But how could I treat Zack any different than I want to be treated? If you really think about that. I go, how would I know how to treat someone how I don't want to be treated? I would treat you how I want to be treated, right? I would be high energy. I would be this, I'd be that. And I would expect you to bring me that back because that's what energizes me. So I go, that's a problem. And then we've heard this platinum rule that's out there: treat others how they want to be treated. But then the problem is you don't know how they want to be treated. The best you have is personality testing, but that's more of a logical assessment, because it's asking you questions. As soon as I ask you a question, it goes into my logical brain. When I show you a value, that's your gut. That's your emotion reacting. That's why our system is different, right? If you're faithful, that's me, not me. Goal setter. There's no questions in ours until you get through to identifying that. Okay? So I'm playing Monopoly with my son, and I'm like, well, and I notice those property cards. He's 9 years old at the time. And they tell you how to treat the property. Which colors have to match because they're all color coordinated, and you have to build evenly. And then if I mortgage the property, right, because I have to pay you, I landed on your hotel somewhere, and I mortgage Park Place and Boardwalk to suck the money out. And then you land on Broadway and Park Place, I don't get paid because they're mortgaged. Right? That's what we do to people. So I'm like, holy shit, am I mortgaging my stepson who's different than me? He's got different genetic code. He's got different other sets of parents, grandparents, right, that have a different energy. Oh my gosh, what if he could teach me how to communicate with him? What if we could end this whole, you got to figure out your kids. You got to figure out your employees, man. Well, how can we possibly figure out an employee when we are not them? And to ask them, they can't tell you because it's emotional. And what people say they don't mean, and what they mean they can't say when it's around emotions. I can tell my wife I love her and I can write her poetry, but it will sound like the same message I could send to my dog who's a Labrador Retriever. You're always there for me. You're fun. You're beautiful. You're witty. I feel safe with you. Well, I need to go to Hallmark, right, and read these poetry things. Go, that's how I feel, right? That's how I feel. So we can't express it. So that's when the idea popped in. What if I could create, and at the time we called it an About Me card. Okay. And literally people had About Me cards. It was done by hand, took 45 minutes to do. And we then, through, because we're advertising, we'd make these little property cards that would say Zack. And it says what you can expect from Zack and whatever his do's and don'ts. And they would talk with people, and it was all analog back in the day. And Alex taught me that he's a deep thinker, and I'm not. He taught me he values serious ways, because serious is one of the 56. I'm not. So then we invented a conversation. I said, okay, so I think we're onto something here. What's missing with all those different personality tests, no matter what you do? It's one and done. It's a team building event, and then it dies. That's what happens. So I said, what if we could invent a process based on this data where two people could have a safe conversation and talk logically around these emotions? And his was my first. I'm doing it right just from my head, like you would do it. We feel our way through life, you and I. We don't plan our way. That's how we're successful. Most people don't get that. They think you have to have a plan. Nope. I have an idea. Now we'll figure it out right in the real time. We're going to figure it out, right, Zack?
Yeah. Build the ship while we're on the ocean.
Yep. That's what we're going to do. Some people can't do that. I go, you can't be successful that way. No, you can't be successful that way. So don't put your judgment on me. That's how I'm successful. So now I ask Alex, okay, so serious, what do you mean by that? It means, focus on what matters most. Okay, focus on what matters most. So I'm interviewing him on this. Tell me about deep thinker. I think about what I thought about. Oh, that makes sense. I'm thinking of now every behavior interaction I've ever had with him. I'm like, holy shit. It was like dropping an Alka-Seltzer tablet into clear water. All the glasses look alike, but when I saw these Dignify traits come alive and saw the person, it was like, holy cow, I see that. He had goal setter. Okay. Now, as goal setter, I'm saying you're a teenage kid. Now he's 14 at the time when I did this. 9 was the inspiration. 14, he does his first About Me card. Okay. Because I'm working on this thing. So he's able to tell me that goal setter, I'm thinking to myself, judgment. He plays video games all day. Like he's the laziest kid I know. Like, right? Judgment. Well, when I just stopped and I listened to him and I asked him, goal setter, tell me what you mean by that. He goes, well, remember when I wanted that electric guitar when I was 12? Yeah. Remember I painted the big shed we have and then I did work for grandma and grandpa? And I remember thinking to myself, yeah, that was weird that you all of a sudden were motivated. You know what I mean? Like, oh, that's weird. My brain goes to the negative. Right. But I'm like, yeah. He goes, I bought that electric guitar for $350 and I earned it in 3 weeks. I'm like, wow, damn, that's my boy. I'm all proud. Yeah. I don't see it because I'm so stuck in my judgment. So now I had a lens where I went, oh my gosh, I can see him for who he is. So bottom line, what he taught me is I want to spend more time with you. Through this conversation, right? That's how we invented the system now, just to talk questions. It's not about becoming a master at reading this results. You don't need to. You just hit the button, communicate, talk, play a game of dignity. Let's play a game. And then it'll pull from the data so we can have a conversation. And so he wanted me to be a mile deep and a foot wide. I am a mile wide and a foot deep. Okay? So I'm not built that way. However, I love him. So I set up times of the year, quarterly, that we go to the cabin, and I will go as deep as you want. And though it was tough for me, I realized deep thinking ways. I'm like, that's really cool. talked about the universe. We listened to music and what it meant to each other. We interpreted lyrics, his music. It just told me how to connect with him. And now we have parents. I got folks, Zach. It's become so simple. I realize people are not complicated. We're super simple. This mom was a client. She goes, I'm taking my kids on vacation. And I've got a 16-year-old who fights with a 14-year-old. Can you picture this? 2 girls, 2 daughters. She goes, it's going to be hell. I go, first of all, if you say it's going to be hell, then it's going to be hell. What you say becomes your day. Okay. She goes, I go, where are you going? She goes, we're going to Sarasota, Florida. Okay. She collected the Dignify data. She had her 2 daughters do our quick little 12-minute survey. And one was this artistic, detailed perfectionist girl. And the other was fun, high creative. You can see why the sisters could be like this, right? And so I go, what are their interests? And she goes, well, the serious one is more into, this and that. And I'm writing this down. I look up Sarasota attractions. I go, okay, here's what you're going to do. And you have to do this early on. You're going to tell your girls you're going on a mystery trip. She goes, okay. And your one perfectionist daughter is going to hate that. Okay. But she's going to hate everything you tell her right now because she's angsty. Okay. But you're going to go without the younger daughter. You're going to let the younger daughter hang out with dad, for example. And with that first daughter, on day 1, you're going to go. I just saw that the Russian ballet is in town. And you're going to go to the Russian ballet. But before you go to the Russian ballet, your daughter is a serious artist. You're going to go to the Museum of Art. You're going to spend the morning there. You're going to take her to lunch. You'll notice her start to talk to you during lunch in ways she never talked to you before. And then you're going to go do a little shopping with her. And you're going to go to the ballet after dinner. Now, the next day, you're going to switch. That younger girl, do you know if there's a circus museum there? She goes, no. I go, circuses are whimsical. They're idealistic. They're magical. They're goofy. I go, she's going to love that, where your other daughter would hate it. So now you're going to have at least a morning with her. Maybe you don't need as much time because she's not serious. And she'll want to go to the beach anyway and have fun. Well, she did this. And after she got back, she goes, Joe, the girls bonded in a way. I mean, they were light and full of energy. Dad and I would say, hey, do you want to go here? And they'd be like, sure, sounds good. She goes, after that experience, they totally opened up. I said, because you see them. Zach, like when you were in school, your teacher saw you. And to be seen is the most powerful thing in the world. And the challenge is we don't know how to see people. Most people are not wired that way. So how do you expect leaders to figure it out? You have to have a system for leaders to see who they lead. And I don't care if you're introvert, extrovert, it doesn't matter your style. We've proven it. You have the data. Here you go. Here's the system. The person will, using science, will automatically connect with you because everything we do is based on science, but it's presented in a very casual way. So they don't even get what's happening to them. All they know is they really see their boss for who they are now. Wow. We're introducing vulnerability in a way that we don't have to say the word. We can just tell each other about each other.
That's really cool.
So
yeah.
So it's just been a wild, fun, and meaningful journey.
One of the stats that I left out was 85% of the workforce is disengaged.
Yeah.
Right. And for so many different reasons, I'm sure. Right. But it sounds like, I mean, even just in your example of these 2 girls, it created engagement, right? When people feel seen, they feel understood, they feel like they belong, they want to be a part of it, like everything changes. And a big part of what we're talking about right here is from the leader comes the company's culture, right? And I heard you mention it on here too. And so I've got a question about it in particular. So I teach a workshop around personal branding and things like that. And one of the things that I talk about, I lump under this idea of public relations, but it's where your reputation comes from, where your brand comes from. And that all stems from values, your core values, your company values, whatever those things might be. And I heard you say like your assessment is value-based. It's not off of the questions, right? And so I'd be interested to hear your perspective of how values play a part in creating that culture, as well as helping people to even understand, and be aligned within themselves too.
Sure. So let's say this. There are values and there are motivations. Okay. So let's think of that. Values might be I have conservative values. I'm faith based. Those are my values. I value integrity. I value honesty, right? Values. But then there's your deep seated drivers, which are a higher sense of how you deliver the values. Okay. So I'm just going to guess. For you, let's say optimism might be yours. Maybe enthusiasm. Maybe fun. Probably sincere at heart or faithful. Those resonate with you, those words?
Yeah, definitely.
Probably unique or creative.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's how you bring safety. That's how you do your values. That's the vehicle of which you bring yourself. So it's funny you say that. We have a gal who does personal websites for people. She goes, Joe, I have them. So she has our technology. She goes, they fill it out, and I write the whole website based on what those words are that you like. It's all written for me, and I put it in there. Now they present themselves that way. I'm like, it's a no. Yeah, exactly. It makes a person feel alive. It's what makes you do you. So, for example, think of a manufacturing floor. Talk about engagement for a second, okay? We can all picture a manufacturing floor, right? There's tons of machines. There's lines of people working on a machine. Okay, So I want you to imagine this. To the outside person like you or I, we walk into that manufacturing, you see a lot of activity. You see a lot of people, some standing there, some hustling, putting stuff in the beginning of the machine, out of the machine, right? And we see that.
Right.
And we might go, oh God, there's a lot of chaos in here. Okay? Now imagine if you could be seen. I was in a manufacturing floor in the pharmaceutical world, and I had the director of manufacturing walk me through the floor. And I said, what's this machine? And you saw a bunch of folks sitting on high top chairs, looking at computer monitors, or just standing looking at computer monitors. Okay, that's what they do all day. Because he goes, this is a new machine, so you just have to monitor the analytics to make sure that everything's running smooth. Yes, you put something in the beginning here, but then it does all this stuff, and then there's an output. He goes, now come here, look at this machine. Another machine, he goes, now this one's old. This one's older. It doesn't have all this automation. So you're literally adjusting dials. You're moving around. It moves faster. It takes two people, and you're hustling all day. I said, okay. Now, in the traditional way that we treat people, Zach, okay, there are folks who are in the manufacturing world, right? They've always been there. It's the blue collar worker industry. Basically, if you have a heartbeat, you come in and you go, you want to work here? Yes. Okay, show up on Tuesday. Then you go through this training, and then a lot of them quit within a week. Okay, how about doing something like this? Person comes in, they get their dignity revealed to them. The interviewer goes, wow, you have moves quick to action. You have competent. Tell me about that. And you say competent, I can figure things out. Tell me about that. Well, I have a quick way of figuring things out. Tell me about moves quick to action. Move it or lose it, you say. I love that. That's hilarious. What does that mean? And they go, well, I just mean you got to hustle. You have to move. And you go, oh my gosh. By the way, here are some beautiful paragraphs of how awesome you are. You give that to them. They'll read it later and go, oh my God, you feel this way about me? No one's ever talked about this about me, right? The words are written. Here you go. Listen, I've got a spot specifically in my mind for you. It's an older machine and you got to hustle. You got to move around. You got to do this and that. And matter of fact, here's the person you're going to be working with. His name is Stan. Look at him. He's like you. He's got moves quick to action. You guys are like two peas in a pod, right? And matter of fact, before you start, you and Stan are going to meet, and I'm going to introduce you guys to each other. I think you're going to really hit it off. Now, do you think that's a safer way to enter a workforce? Oh, by the way, here's your supervisor. Let me introduce you to your supervisor and how they're wired. Like we are changing the way people communicate. These are talking emotions in a logical way, but this fear that people have about people in general, you have to dismantle it. And the only way you can do that, in my opinion, is through human dignity. This is how you're wired. This is how they're wired. Now, if you get someone who is peaceful, stay in the background, calm, patient, you go, oh my gosh, do we have the job for you? It's a newer machine. And it takes a calm demeanor to analyze. You'll just look at this. You'll be sitting on this chair. Does this environment look good for you? Yes. Matter of fact, everyone who works on this machine is totally chill. They're totally relaxed. Person goes, oh my gosh, that feels safe. Yeah. Imagine I see you and I'm putting you where you belong instead of just some random crap. We now have a way to do it. That's what I said to you earlier. A system, if it's not a system, it's just a bunch of stuff that lasts for a while and dies.
Right.
Right?
I love that.
So this is the world we're trying to create. And what I've realized, I thought this was a soft-natured thing. It's not. It's a hard-natured thing. The people who execute our system the best are hard-natured people, like folks who are facts and figures. The people that would be misinterpreted as rude, right? Or as too direct. They execute it now because for the first time, they want to see people for who they are, but they get misinterpreted because they're wired just to get stuff done. And now they can be seen for the first time as a human being. And they're like, I love it. So you're saying they come in, I do this, and then I do that with them? Yes. And they look at you as a human being and not some scary jerk. Oh my God, I love this.
That's really cool.
You know?
Yeah. And I love this idea too. I mean, we talked about it being servant leadership, right? And so I was in seminary, and the first time I was introduced to that concept was Jack Miller. He wrote a book, The Heart of the Servant Leader. So it was the first one I ever read. It was really good. But I love this concept, and you hear the definitions of leadership from a bunch of different places. One guy that I actually had wrote a book with, Kenny Thomas, he says leadership is the example that you set for the people that you serve, right? So that's like one example of it. And so there's a lot of these different definitions of what leadership is, but one that I've heard all the time, especially growing up, and I think there was probably a product of previous generations and stuff as well, but it was this idea that like leaders are made, or leaders are born, not made. It's like you either have it or you don't. You're either going to be a follower or a leader. Like I remember like even getting that judgment from like an early school, like, oh, Zach's just a follower. Yeah. Right. And it was like stuck out to me. I was like, actually the opposite is true, but I'm not going to fight you about it. It was just curious to me. But what I hear you saying more than anything in all of this is like you have developed a system, a patented system, right? That helps to not only see the dignity in people, but you're allowing leaders to be made. Like it's like with this skill set, with this ability to be able to communicate, you could be a good leader by just following this. Yes. Would you say that that's true?
Yes. If you have a desire to lead, though, you have to have the desire, right? I always say leadership is like swimming. I had these 3 girls after that stepson with my wife, right? And the youngest saw their older sisters swimming. So we're in a pool. My youngest jumps in the pool. She has a desire to swim. I had to dive in and get her because she has no skill sets, right? Right. So leadership is a skill which anybody can learn. Some have a natural motivation to lead. Some discovered themselves because they're so good at doing what they did that they're in a leadership position. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to do it. Either side, both sides, whether you desire to lead or don't, need a process. They need the tools and the skill sets, and it has to be executable. It has to be, now click the button, and the system will tell you what to say to this person, right? To give them confidence as to how to lead, but you use your style. You're going to be authentic throughout it, because some of the greatest leaders are introverts. Some of the greatest leaders, because it's about vulnerability and humility and be able to see people for who they are and put them on the right seat. So imagine, Zach, you enter my world, right? And you're interviewing for a certain job. I can look at this. I have the analytics to know the type of motivations that go with certain roles. And I could say, Zach, you're highly creative. I've actually like put you on my creative team. You'd be like, really? How'd you know that? You don't even know me. No, because of the data. Look at this data. Tell me about this stuff. No, you don't want to go there. Trust me. You want to go over here. And this is the job description. How does that sound? And you'd be like, you see me. You get it.
Yeah.
Right? Because what's happening is, why am I disengaged? There's 2 things. Yes, leadership for sure. But the leader doesn't see them. And often a person doesn't know themselves. So they're doing a job that they themselves can't fulfill who they are in. And that's where midlife crisis comes in. The midlife crisis asks, is this what I should be doing for the rest of my life? Did I do this? I say, that's not what midlife crisis is. Midlife crisis is, are you bringing you to whatever you do? That's why you feel hollow. If your top 5 dignity traits aren't activated in what you do every day, that's when you go, there's something missing, but you don't know what to say. You don't know what to do about it. And we go, oh, I know. Are you activating this trait? No. Are you activating this trait? No. How about this one? Sometimes. How about this one? I go, that's why you feel the way you do. And yes, there's poor leadership a part of that, but we are such an averse. We like to be, like in Midwest anyways, we like to be nice, not kind. And I say kind is telling someone they have ketchup on their face around the dinner table. And nice is not saying a thing, only for them to find out when they use the restroom. They got a big glob with something on their face. We can be kind. We can give people feedback without charging into this defensiveness, but we just have to do it the right way. And we use science and connection to do that.
I love that. Well, look, I mean, that kind of brings us to the end here. So, I mean, I've got a couple questions, one of those being, if somebody's interested in finding out more, what's the way to either get in contact with you or find out more about this assessment?
Sure. So Dignify.com. You can go to Dignify.com and click on, take the survey, and it will reveal to you at least your first dignity trait. People can, you can do a survey for $25 and just discover your dignity. Or if you're a business leader and you're in a position to really make an impact with the department, it doesn't have to be the whole company. We really start in a department with someone who gets this and like aligns with our values. Then just email me at joek@dignify.com, joek@dignify.com, and we can begin a conversation of how we can impact your department. You don't have to do the whole company. You just start with willing people. You have to be willing. I'm willing. I want to make a difference. I want to take my game to the next level. I want to help my people because I truly care about them. That's that. If you want to just discover your dignity, go on and take the survey.
Cool. Well, Joe, thanks for being willing to jump on the show with me today. I appreciate you and the knowledge that you've dropped on us. It's been a great conversation. So thanks again.
Well, Zach, it's been a true privilege, and I really am appreciative of the time.
Absolutely. And thank you guys for listening. As always, if you found this helpful, informational, exciting, please like, share, subscribe, do all that fun stuff so that we can reach more people and keep elevating and accelerating. Thanks.